Found us. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Welcome to my takeout, my Emil Amok's takeout, my takes on all things considerable. We have all these. We got new software, and the software has all these little bugs, not bugs, but little things they do differently than they did when they were the old software. But now, so it's just a little, a little delayed. Anyway, so we're here. We're here with you now. Thank you for being here. We're here Monday through Friday. We try live at 2 p.m. Pacific. Breaking news: that Daniel Penny case. Just they had a they dropped the most serious charge, and now he's facing a lesser charge next week when the jury reconvenes. So we're going to talk to. Fortunately for you, I have a legal expert. Well, he's professor of Asian American Studies, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University. Daniel Phil Gonzalez, our friend, he's got a law degree. What we're going to talk to him about that and other things in the news. Let me talk about before we get to Dan. Should we swish out? I need to talk to you about Penn Oakland. Penn Oakland is the poets, essayists, and novelists organization, part of the big Penn National. The Oakland Penn has been dubbed the working class Penn. It's the Oakland chapter co-founded by Ishmael Reed, the late Floyd Salas, and there was another third party. I forget her name, but it was a bold pen. It's still a bold pen, and their award ceremony is this weekend on tomorrow, and we usually do it live at the library. We go to the Rockridge Library in Oakland, but we did it last year. This year we're going to do it virtual. I think someone was nostalgic about the pandemic and said, hey, let's do it virtual. And actually, it's more, the chances of getting people from, nationally or internationally to come is actually greater this way. So here's how you attend. It's free. You just register, and you can just go to the Oakland Public Library site, and that is at oaklandlibrary.bibliocommons.com/events. And there you see it on the screen there. Penn Oakland 2024 Awards Ceremony, the 35th annual Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Awards. And Ishmael Reed, the co-founder, will be there, say a few words. I'm co-hosting. I'm privileged to co-host this again with my co-hostess with the mostest, Tennessee Reed. And there will be local artists, and there will also be some national, international winners there. Check it out, 2 o'clock Pacific tomorrow on Saturday, December 7th. That's the 35th annual Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Awards. We're doing it online, virtual. Go to oaklandlibrary.bibliocommons.com/events. There you see it on the screen. Sign up. You got to register. They'll send you a link, and there's about, 60 or so seats left. So it's not like it's sold out, but you don't want to be left out, do you? Of course not. Of course not. Attend the Penn Oakland Awards virtually through the Oakland Library site, oaklandlibrary.bibliocommons.com. I wrote a piece in the Oakland Post this week, and I said, I met a lot of readers, at last year's event at the Rockridge Library. And, so that's one of the bad things about not doing it live in person. But people can come and view it from all over, like if they live in New York or Chicago or wherever, LA. I noticed when I wrote my piece in the Oakland Post this week, I said, the one reason, if you're going crazy about the politics of the day, then there's one antidote, and that's read more poetry, read more essays, read more novels. You got to get out of the real world and go into the realm where people are dissecting the things that happen in the real world and putting it out in a poetic, literary voice. It's deeper understanding of all the stuff that we're experiencing raw, and it will help you understand some of the things that are happening today and maybe make you feel good about humanity, your fellow man, your fellow citizens of the world by getting a hold of a good piece of poetry, a good book of poetry. Ishmael Reed, for one. I know why his latest poetry book. Go to the Oakland Post. I have a link to that. And other authors, novelists of this is the thing about, you go to an awards event, you see what's worth reading. So check it out. Be there live, virtually, at the oaklandlibrary.biblio.coms.com. That's where you register. It's for the 35th annual Pan Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Awards. Okay. All right. So today I want to talk about Daniel Penny. And we're also going to talk about some of the things I talked about this week with Professor Dan. And, because he's also a Asian American history professor, I want to talk to him about Pearl Harbor, too. Because tomorrow's Pearl Harbor Day. A lot of people just sort of like, Pearl Harbor Day. We've been there, right? But you don't really understand what happened. You don't really understand not what happened at Pearl Harbor, but what happened in America with Asians in America. So let's bring up Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez, because I want to talk about this Daniel Penny case. Professor Dan, I got you diminutive. I don't want to do that. I want to get you Professor Dan. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Let me lighten up here.
Yeah.
Kind of grainy.
Yeah.
See,
Kind of grainy.
that helps a little
That's
bit.
all right. That's right. A lot of people are just listening. I want to talk about this manslaughter charge that was against Daniel Penny that was dismissed. If you don't know the Daniel Penny case, because this is the thing about the media being centered in New York. Everyone is in on the latest case, but these cases are are important not just because they happen in New York, but that when the United Healthcare guy is killed and murdered, on the streets of New York, and the gunman is allowed to get away. They still don't know where the gunman is, but that's been a big story the last couple of days. But this just broke. The Manhattan judge overseeing the case of a man accused in the choking death of a disturbed subway passenger last year dismissed the most serious charge against him on Friday afternoon, leaving jurors to consider a lesser charge when they return to court next week. The jurors today, Friday, deadlocked over whether the man, Daniel Penny, was guilty of manslaughter, leaving unresolved a case that has come to exemplify New York's post-pandemic struggles. They will now consider whether he should be convicted of criminally negligent homicide, a charge that carries a lesser prison sentence. And you'll recall this case last year bothered people when prosecutors are saying that Penny fatally choked a subway passenger, Jordan Neely, who was a 30-year-old former Michael Jackson impersonator who struggled with his mental health. And they said that Neely was held in a chokehold by Penny for about 6 minutes on a train on May 1st, 2023. Neely boarded the train, began yelling at passengers, and that's when Penny approached, and then he approached Neely from behind and put him in a chokehold, and that's when Neely lost his life. So, Dan, this is the case that people talked about last year. It sort of I don't know. Were you aware that have you heard about the trial or
Oh yeah.
subsequent?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where okay, when it came up, he said, okay, let's see if there's going to be justice for Jordan Neely or Daniel Penny. What do you think now with this? The manslaughter charge is thrown out. Is that fair?
I think it was fair.
Yeah.
I think it was fair because the jury deadlocked on the manslaughter charge. You know, homicides include everything from first degree, of course, to second degree, to the manslaughters, and then these cases, which are even less than manslaughter. Frankly, criminal negligence. Criminal negligence is more fitting, but I think the manslaughter charge also worked, and therefore, I'd be interested in understanding the jury's reasoning, on why they were deadlocked for so long, um, and hopefully, it was on technical issues having to do with the way that Mr. Penny was holding the victim, Jordan Neely.
A
Um,
chokehold.
yeah, and 6 minutes. I don't know where he learned that. I don't know where Daniel Penny learned how to apply the
Yeah.
chokehold. Whether or not it was something that he picked up while he was in the military, which is possible, or
Yeah.
whether he had other training in the martial arts. And I don't recall that being submitted into evidence.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, he's a
and
26-year-old former Marine,
right,
and just from knowing a few things about chokeholds, some people think that okay, because they watch MMA and that kind of thing, that you can hold someone and then someone taps out and then you let them go and they're okay. But it's, I mean, it's not an exact thing. Everyone's different, and you can
absolutely.
apply you can apply more pressure than you think, and you can say,
Well, it
oh,
also depends on what's going on with the victim. Is the victim still
yeah,
resisting? Are they still fighting back? Do they present a continuing danger?
yeah,
So that's where the reasonable person thing comes in. Now, I have a problem with reasonableness of his actions because
yeah,
clearly he was in a superior position by
yeah,
getting the victim from behind. Okay. I don't know what the positioning of his legs were, but typically when people apply a chokehold, and if they know anything about wrestling or judo, particularly, they could apply at least one leg lock. Okay,
yeah,
with the leg. So I don't know what was going on. Was Mr. Neely still resisting? That's what it comes down to, because 6 minutes is a long time.
oh yeah, six
You know,
minutes.
and
I
and
mean,
I can't imagine that he was resisting beyond the first two or three. Now, if he was mentally imbalanced, right,
yeah,
or if there were any kind of drugs involved, I could see him resisting. I have seen people resist um, when a chokehold was applied by a police officer who is trained in the use of the chokehold, and
mhm,
unfortunately, people suffered permanent injury, and in instances that I did not witness, they died. And a lot of this was going on in the 70s and 80s when certain police departments still used a certain baton that is basically the Western version of the tonfa, which is a classic Okinawan weapon. Um, that farmers used for thrashing things, but
yeah,
it could be used as a weapon, and especially as a chokehold. It was outlawed because
yeah,
these too many of these deaths and maimings occurred with the use of that application. So now we have a similar situation where a person may or may not have had training. So are they a reasonable person after they have training, or do you apply the special person analysis that you would for a police officer? So police officer is held to a
yeah,
higher standard because they've had training. So I didn't know whether or not Mr. Penny had additional training. And if he did, that actually could go against him. It would go against his defense as a reasonable person. A reasonable person doesn't necessarily know how to do a chokehold.
Well, now that the judge has thrown it out and they're going for a lesser charge, he can't. That's gone.
Sure, sure, the
Manslaughter's
manslaughter
gone.
is gone. The
Yeah,
manslaughter is gone, but the negligent homicide is still there, and it'll still be based on the same facts. It'll
yeah,
still be based on a chokehold.
yeah.
That's
All
the
right,
activity.
but basically, manslaughter would carry a stiffer penalty.
Yes,
Um,
that's true.
Jordan Neely's dead. Nothing's going to
Yes,
bring him back, and it came through the actions of Penny. It's there's some people who are going to say that he's getting off because he's white. He's getting off because
of course,
he, yeah,
of
he's
course.
military, and this is law and order, and Jordan Neely is black. I
Well,
don't want to make it.
would a reasonable person of any race or color have reacted the same way to Mr. Neely? Would they have done something else? Would they have struck him? Okay, I think Mr. Penny was using what he may have thought, and I don't know if he took the stand. He probably didn't. Defense counsel would probably not want him to take the stand, um, and he has a right to remain silent and
Right.
have the proof against him proven by the prosecution. So uh, Mr. Penny may have been thinking that he's applying the least potentially lethal device to get Mr. Neely to stop. Okay, and that's the line, you know. So that's why I'm interested in knowing what the jury saw. Okay, if there was video, and you know what it is, man, everybody's got a phone, everybody can record this stuff. There has to be some video that showed the moments during
Yeah.
which time the victim was in a chokehold, and especially the final moments when he was no longer resisting, and then the question comes up, is he just passed out or is he dead? Right.
Yeah.
So I don't
Well, I mean,
I don't
if
have any information on when he was pronounced dead, whether or not they were able to resuscitate him for any length of time after the chokehold was released.
well, it says prosecutors said that Mr. Penny's actions were not accidental and that he failed to recognize Mr. Mr. Neely's humanity, squeezing his neck ever tighter as he struggled to break free. They argued that Mr. Penny's chokehold had killed Mr. Neely, pointing to the testimony of the New York City medical examiner who ruled that Mr. Neely's death was caused by compression of the neck. So it wasn't like there was some drugs in Neely or something else, or that it was the compression of the neck from the chokehold. Mr.
Okay.
Penny's lawyers argued that their client's actions had had not been the direct cause of Mr. Neely's death, instead suggesting that it was a toxic combination of synthetic marijuana use, sickle cell trait, and mental illness that killed him. So they're saying that he had already conditions that would have brought on his death. And some jurors, they were deadlocked.
Yeah.
I
What was
mean,
the
I
proof
guess they
of
need.
that? Yeah. What was the
Pardon me?
proof? I read some of that, and what was
No,
the proof of that, though? You know.
I don't know. It didn't. It
So
didn't say in the.
it really is a difficult case, much more difficult than people think, and the presumption, it is very much susceptible to the presumption that race was involved, and we don't know that. We don't know, Mr. Penny's motivation other than he wanted to get Neely to stop.
Yeah.
Was Neely really presenting a clear and present danger of imminent harm? Okay, uh, and
Maybe immediately, but once he was subdued, I think there was no danger. I don't think. I mean, if he was subdued,
yeah,
Penny
why
should have
was he holding on for 6 minutes?
6 minutes.
Because once
Yeah.
you had him subdued and he's down, even if he's resisting, you know, uh, most people who know something about martial arts, and especially people who are familiar with the law,
Yeah.
okay, and self defense and defense of others, which is
Mhm.
this case, okay, they would ask for assistance. Would you get him to stop kicking, or if that was an issue, or could you help me, sustain his hands so that
Yeah.
I can release him? right? That's the way that you would proceed if you were concerned about his welfare, the welfare of Mr. Neely. And
Yeah.
so that's why the negligent homicide, criminally negligent homicide, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
How
To
many,
me,
if he's found guilty on negligent homicide, because they're not clear how many deadlocked, you know, I mean, if it was one juror or many, or if it was split, it's not reported. But if it sounds like maybe they can go for the lesser charge, if they do, it's a lesser prison sentence. But how many years?
right.
A couple of years, and then he's
Yeah,
out.
manslaughter is anywhere from 2 to 5 typically.
Yeah.
Once you get over 5 years, you're talking about second degree murder in most states. So
So
there are
negligent.
yeah, there are two levels of manslaughter in some states, right?
Mhm.
Voluntary and involuntary, and
Yeah.
so criminally negligent homicide is relative to involuntary manslaughter. It's just a lesser charge. Yeah,
So maybe 1 to 3 years
1 to 3. Yeah, yeah, something like
with
that.
the time off for good behavior, kind of thing.
Yeah,
See, I mean, look, and just speaking from a victim's perspective, I mean, I have had family members who have been murdered, and nothing happened to the perp, and because of the homicide laws in California, I know that I would have gladly uh, would have seen would have thought justice was had if there was a manslaughter charge, at least a
yeah,
manslaughter, or at least negligent homicide. We didn't get any of that.
that's right.
The guy spent no time in jail, the perp, and so I know 1 to 3 years, nothing will bring back Jordan Neely, but I don't know if Daniel Penny is, if he dodged a bullet here and got away with something, and he'll probably, maybe in his mind he was just doing what a good Samaritan does, right? Stand up in the subway and protect
Well,
the
yeah, I
car
wouldn't use the Samaritan thing. It's not an appropriate application of the concept.
of being the Samaritan.
He was in
Okay,
a,
then he was just
you
he
know,
was just a
he was acting in defense of others. Okay,
yeah.
because
All right.
obviously he wasn't threatened. He was coming from behind.
Yeah.
So if he was threatened at all, he was very indirectly, and it would be the people that were facing or faced by Mr. Neely that would be, in the range of imminent harm. So that's really where it's at. And I really, just under the circumstances, I
Yeah.
totally think that if he were found guilty
Mm.
of, if he was convicted of criminally negligent homicide, that it would be appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. The jury's back next week. We'll see. A lot of people, talked about this for the last, for, for a part of the year. They talked about the people like Jordan Neely out there, out in the streets, mental health issues, and
Yeah.
it brought out a lot of sentiment from people who, the law and order folks, who saw who defended Daniel Penny.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
part of the divide that we saw in 2024 in the election. You know.
Well, look at the cases in San Francisco where people with mental health issues were killed by police.
Oh yeah.
So there was an instance within the last 3 years in Oakland. There was another instance in remember well Antioch.
Oh yeah. Phil,
Vallejo and San Francisco. So it's happened, and this is at the hands of people who are trained, right? I mean, it's not like a George Floyd instance where the police were acting with real malice, and and
yeah.
and and they were convicted accordingly, but they were
Well,
they were acting with real malice.
but this is like a kind of like a vigilante thing, right? I mean, Daniel Penny
Yes,
is
it
like
is a vigilante thing,
he should
and
be
and
seen.
and yeah, and that's the reason that people don't want to get involved. One of the reasons that people don't want to get involved is a vigilante thing. It's like when you see somebody being accosted on the roadway and you want to stop. I would want to stop and make the violence stop. But at the same time, once I engage, right, I'm vulnerable to the kind of charges, depending on how things work out, that Mr. Penny was charged with, right? and
Uh,
and and so you don't want to volunteer. You want to stop down the road. You want to call the cops. Get the CHP there as rapidly as possible. But in the meantime, somebody could be hurt and dying. You
See,
know.
this is the thing, though. I mean, you would hope that there are people who would step up, right?
Yeah.
And and this is where what is this thing that you say do the right thing? What
Right.
would do the
To
right
what
thing entail?
extent do you get engage? Right.
Yeah. I mean, is what Daniel Penny did, was that doing the right thing until he killed Jordan Neely,
He was.
or
He was.
is it just
His immediate motivation was probably correct. Right. Get
yeah,
him to stop and make sure that he is not a threat. He's not an imminent threat. Okay.
yeah,
But once again, he held him for 6 minutes.
yeah.
Right.
Well, this is the thing that right, the 6 minute thing is critical, but I think what the outcome of this case will be is more people will say when they see something like this, they won't take action.
That's
And I
right.
think most people won't. Most
They
people, if
will
they have
not.
a phone, they'll call 911, they'll call the cops, they'll do something else, but they won't take action. And that's probably the most prudent thing, although in the
From
time
a
it takes to
legal from a legal perspective, it is.
yeah. See, I wish there were more. I would want some kind of Cape Crusader to come out and save me if I was accosted by someone. I
Yeah.
would want Superman, Supergirl, Superboy, any of the supers to come down and save me.
How
If
about
I were in that need. But that doesn't happen, right? They see
well,
someone accosting a Filipino guy like me, and they'll say, "Oh, he'll work it out. He probably knows martial arts or something." They won't
you
come
know,
to my rescue.
I personally have seen people uh, stop a threat, physical engagement,
Ah,
by simply, but they could have been sued on the basis of what they did because they brandished a weapon,
oh,
and a
what
weapon could be anything simple, like you could just be standing there with a golf club. That's
or
enough.
like a Sharpie, a pen, pencil. I mean,
A a
people like
ballpoint pen.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Sharpie
you can
Sharpie is too flexible and it's not pointy enough. But yes, it can be used
yeah.
as they sell devices
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
are essentially hardened plastic that are
Duct
called, police officers sometimes call them come-alongs,
yeah.
but they're outlawed. You
Oh
you
yeah.
can't have that. You can't have them. You could. They used to sell them as keychain pieces,
Right,
right?
right. Well,
It's
yeah,
readily available.
I mean, women know about this, right? They have these keychain fobs that are really weapons, and
Right.
then and you're supposed to use them. And how many times have you heard someone say, "Well, you walk to a parking lot, you have your keys in your knuckles,
And
ready."
are they able to deliver a punch in a
Well, I mean,
manner in a manner that is likely to get the person to stop? That's the issue.
yeah,
Okay, so what's outlawed now? Pepper spray is
pepper spray.
outlawed,
Yeah,
right? Obviously, taser is
yeah,
outlawed, right? So I can't have any of those things in my car anymore
yeah.
because they've been outlawed over the past what 25 years.
Yeah,
You know,
you can't have pepper spray legally.
I think you can,
I
but
think pepper.
it has to be the over the counter variety. It can't
I
be
mean,
like bear spray.
no bear spray, but if you had like a can of low grade crystal hot sauce or something like that might stop a Louisianan
Yeah, you
because
don't
he'd
want to
be
you don't want to spend yeah, Tabasco's too expensive and Louisiana is a nice alternative. I like Frank's myself. Frank's
right,
is quite
right.
good.
No,
Yeah.
crystal is nice and medium. It's
Crystal's good.
medium.
That's very Filipino. Crystal goes all the way back to farm worker days where
Really, crystal does. I didn't know.
yeah.
I didn't know that because it's not like
Well,
Tabasco. Tabasco's the
well
hot one.
yeah, yeah. Well,
It's not as
the
hot as hot, but
Crystal had the nice trumpet shaped bottle
oh
that
yes, 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 yes.
and it had a circular dispenser top, which
Green
only
cap.
lets you put out drops at a time, right? and the reason that I knew about this as a worker, a person who was around farm workers and around
Yeah.
the farms and stuff, is because they would take, once that bottle was used up, they'd wash it out, take that plastic top off, and fill it with double-ended toothpicks, so that
Really?
you could, yeah, and you could see once again,
Wait,
this is
wait. So
farm work.
what? Tell me
This is
what
old
would the
timer
double?
farm worker culture, and the
So what
fact
would
that
the double? What would
they
the
would they'd
double?
shake it out, and it would let one toothpick at a time. You just
Wow.
shake it, and then one toothpick at a time would come out, right?
Oh, thank you, Manong Dan, for that great story about my
Well,
double.
I'm just telling you, man. Recycling and all the rest of that stuff. That's part of the culture. That's part of being poor. It's part of
Yeah,
being a farm worker, right?
and
We
then-
used to
and
call it a
a lot.
bracero lunch. You know what a bracero lunch break was?
What was
If
that?
you were doing tomatoes, they would core out a tomato, okay?
Yeah.
Put
Oh, they'd
some
save
hot
the. Yeah.
sauce and mayo in it and eat that.
Wow, I can see that. I can see
Yeah.
that. I did like when I was a small boy and we went out to Golden Gate Park on our little family picnics with other Filipinos. That was a great sandwich, a
Yep.
sliced tomato and
Yep.
mayonnaise sandwich.
Hey, just stuff
And
that. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, listen, Dan, I appreciate you saying sharing the farm lore, but one last thing about
Well, we got into it
you
because
know
our hot sauce. We're talking about
yeah.
using hot sauce as a defensive
Odds-
weapon, and we're
well, but
talking about self-defense and defense of
yeah,
others. That's how we got there. Now, I hope everybody understands. I do think that the charge is appropriate, and
yeah,
and and it may have be that, I don't know what the original charge was, but it was probably manslaughter,
yeah,
and voluntary manslaughter particularly. That's what I would go for. I mean, in some jurisdictions, prosecutor might have decided they wanted to go for second degree murder.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but
I
you
think
know,
that. See, I would have been happy with that, but now we go down the descent of charges. But I think, like I said, the takeaway for most people is I don't want to get involved, and that's too bad because we saw that during that homicide um, that took place at the Hilton of the CEO of United Healthcare. I mean, he was gunned down. No one. There were people there reportedly, but no one wanted to get involved. But who would? The guy's got a gun. He shot someone. Um, but
yeah, there
people
was a
did.
woman walking. Yeah, I think the closest person was a woman who was walking by him,
Yeah.
even as he pulled the trigger. You know.
People just don't want to get involved. It's like, hey, not my business. But
Well, I mean, if you're walking past a guy, he's got a gun out and he's pointing it at somebody, you want to get involved, you better be
well,
able
you
to
want to
block
run
bullets.
away.
And you,
Well,
I know people who can block bullets, but they can only do it once.
yeah, well, that's true. Anyway, it's just I know. I just remember being in New York around that time when Daniel Penny was in the subway, um, and Jordan Neely was killed. And let's see what happens next week and what comes out. So let us swish on
Swish
to
on.
the next topic. I wanted to talk about. We're going to talk about Pearl Harbor in a sec. I want to talk about Pete Hegseth a little bit. What's going on there? I I thought he'd be gone by the end of the week. He's not. He's still there. Trump is egging him on. I think Trump
Well,
is just
according to
waiting.
him, Trump is egging him on.
Yeah,
All these guys lie like hell. So, you know,
yeah. Well, I think that maybe Trump is letting him dangle until he finds someone else. I don't think he really wants to get
well, he
Hegseth.
already, he floated a couple of names already, and they're more Floridians, right?
Yeah,
We already
yeah,
got Bondi up there, and it looks like she's going to at least make it to the hearings. And
yeah,
now he's floated Scott, man, one of the worst senators that I can recall, former governor of the state of Florida. When you
yeah.
see his record as a former governor of the state of Florida, you're wondering how he ever got elected to the Senate. And then he was
Yeah,
also involved in some scams, some
yeah,
money making scams around medical insurance and all that.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, Scott was I believe, a Democrat. Then he turned to a Republican. I think
Yeah, well,
that happens. I mean,
that happens. That
yeah.
happens. But
So I mean, but just the fact that Trump seems to
got
be,
one of those in Arizona, and you had one, of course, Mansion
yeah,
in
yeah.
West Virginia.
But the fact that Trump keeps nominating people who have questionable backgrounds, I mean, it just,
It
I don't
doesn't
know.
make sense to a lot of people, right? It doesn't. People
Right.
say that doesn't make sense because there's going to be some resistance. Well, why do you want to make sense? I guess because people voted for this guy,
Yeah.
they think that there's going to sense coming out of him. All right, because they
Yeah.
made that kind of an investment. But what about his all his other behaviors
Yeah.
say to you that he's going to make logical choices?
Yeah.
There is a logic to his choices, and that
Right.
is these are people that are going to follow through with what I want them to do to the American government and
Yeah.
American society. That's it. That's the logic. So why are people saying it doesn't make sense? It only doesn't make sense if you want him to make fair judicial appointments. That's what you that then it would make sense to you. You sound like
Yeah.
a freaking Democrat, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Among qualified people, right? I
Yeah,
mean, you want you
I
want a qualified person? Look,
I'm
he
on
called me up to
on
be.
some of my best quotes that I'm looking at on Blue Sky, right, from other
Yeah.
people were
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm tired of Democrats showing up to a knife fight with a rule book.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty damn good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's
We
the
have
thing. I mean,
expectations. Okay, what you should be doing is right here. Yeah,
all right,
and then you're
but
getting
this
stabbed.
but this goes to the heart of what happened at the beginning of the week, because here we are at the end of the week, and at the beginning of the week we didn't know, Hegseth was less tarnished than he is now, and we
Yeah, but
just
his
had,
mom took it all back.
yeah,
His mom took
he
it all
what?
back because he's reformed.
Oh yeah, yeah. His
He's
mom said
reformed,
he's
and
good.
I was just ticked off. I was ticked off because it was his second marriage. He was divorcing.
Yeah,
It was nasty.
but here's the thing, Dan. It means he's a changed man, but
Yes,
that
it is.
doesn't mean he didn't do the things they said he did. He
You got to be careful with changed man because people
Yeah,
will start identifying that with transgender,
right.
and
He
of
is.
course,
Yeah, he was
what effect that had on the outcome of the election. So
right. He was Petra Hegseth. Now he's a changed man. But here's the thing. At the beginning of the week, we started off with Joe Biden. Joe Biden pardoning his son. Now that was the first indicator that the Democrats are not going to be playing by the rule book. That they were going to fight fire with fire, and if Trump was going to do his thing, and Trump has pardoned people in the past, that Biden, given the political landscape we're in, he's going to pardon his son, and that's one of his lines in his statement was, "I hope the American people understand," and I do, but a lot of people didn't, and he's been getting a lot of flack
well,
for
simply
for
because it
pardoning
looks
his son.
hypocritical. It looks hypocritical primarily because he said he wouldn't do it. He was asked about it before,
Right.
and he said, "I will not do that." Okay. Now, now it was easier for him to say that when there was a possibility that Harris and Waltz were going to win.
Mhm.
Trump won, and Trump is going to still come after Biden himself, and he's going to come after people in his family. Biden is a tougher shot because if Trump goes after Biden directly, people are going to say, "Look at that." Okay, this guy is going to try and punish people. Wow, isn't it enough that he's out of office and all the rest of this stuff? They did all these investigations and they came up with nothing. I mean, they spent tens of millions of dollars, right, over almost a 4-year period, about a 3-year period, looking for stuff that they could hang on anybody in the Biden family. And the most they came up with was a conservative jurisdiction in L.A., right? I mean, the area, the city itself is not conservative, but the justice system is in Los
Right.
Angeles, right? Some of the worst cases in violation of people's constitutional rights, particularly First Amendment, free speech, probable cause, Fourth Amendment, okay,
Mhm.
and Fifth and Sixth Amendments protections, due process, that come out of L.A. Okay, so who prosecutes? federal jurisdiction in L.A. So they go after him. Okay, I think it's pretty clear that there's a little bit political taint there. All right. The
Yeah.
other thing is Trump could come after him again with faked up charges. Okay, do the same stuff, and so he's giving him not only a pardon for something that he might be get convicted sentenced for, right? He's also pardoning him preemptively. All
Oh
right.
yeah. Yeah.
Now, now,
Well,
now,
and
who did
that's
that on
leading.
a massive scale?
Yeah.
Mr.
Well,
Trump.
that's the thing. A lot of people saying, well, maybe we ought to have all these preemptive pardons for everyone. And Andy Borowitz, who's a satirist, said he put out his Borowitz report saying Biden to announce he will pardon all Democrats because that's pretty much what it would take to
Well,
cover
I'm
everybody.
still registered as a Democrat, although I've been, thinking about going independent for a couple of decades now.
Yeah, I think I was declined to state, so I'm not
Okay.
stating. But one of my kids
So,
reminded me
so
that
you're in
for
the closet for other reasons, huh?
yeah, one of my kids reminded me that I did register Republican for a few months because I wanted to vote in the Republican primary, but for some reason, this is like 15 years ago or something.
Yeah, but now you can. I think now under California law, you can be independent and do that.
Right, and so I don't know. I don't know what I am because what people realize is that we're all kind of fluid, but but look at who are the people who are very happy that Trump won, basically. Like
Well,
Trump just well he just named David Sachs, who's a big
crypto,
venture capitalist here in San
crypto,
Francisco,
yeah, yeah.
crypto, and he's going to be the crypto AI guy, and people like that you ask them about Donald Trump and they're all cheering. They love him. Nothing's wrong with the world, right? You ask people who are undocumented, you ask people who are brown, people of color, you ask people who don't have the kind of wherewithal, who don't own crypto, have no idea about AI. You ask them about, if they like Trump, and for the most part, I mean, probably to the person, most people are anti-Trump. And that's kind of the divide. If you're crypto, you're definitely pro Trump. If you're that's essentially the the symbol of wealth, right? You're for Trump, and if you're not,
There's a lot of young men. I don't know. My sons are no longer young. I mean, they're hitting.
yeah,
They're on the inner lip, right, of
yeah,
middle age,
yeah,
but their generation of young men sound a lot like the alienated sort that people are saying,
yeah,
have shifted over to being Republican.
yeah,
And I think it's worse than that. I think there's a lot of independents or people who decline to state. I'm not, obviously,
yeah,
I'm not talking about you personally,
yeah.
but that they don't like Trump from a moral and ethical point of view, but they support him because of the free market side of things.
And
Um,
he's not even totally free market,
no, he's
right?
not.
I
Well, the
mean, if you're for yeah,
Republican Party has not been free market.
yeah, but
You know,
if you're for closing of the borders, you're not free market. If you're for
well, no kidding,
isolationism,
no kidding. You
yeah,
know,
if you're for isolationism, you're not for free market. I mean, we need a guy like William F. Buckley, the old Buckley from the '60s.
Eh,
That's a
yeah,
kind
but
of
when we
conservative.
say Buckley, nobody even knows who the hell that is,
I
man. I
know, I
almost said who
know.
the f that is, and some of the best arguments that I can recall from my childhood and from my teen years when I was in high school, right,
Right.
were between Buckley and all the assorted liberals,
Yeah.
right?
Gore Vidal, Norman Mailer. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Oh man, the stuff with Mailer was fantastic.
Yeah.
You know,
So, I mean, I only mentioned Buckley because, when people, they should look at him up if they want to see what a real conservative was.
yeah, and he
If they
had
were,
his own damn show, and
yeah.
he was quite good at it. You know.
Yeah. Well, he was a showman but less of a showman than Trump and much smarter than Trump. So
Well,
and a
Roman,
different appeal, a different kind of appeal because William F. Buckley was an elitist. Trump is a moneyed, uh, you know, he stands on his
he's
money.
also an elitist. He's
Yeah,
faking it. He's an elitist that's telling everybody, "I'm for you,"
yeah,
and they're believing him. They're
and
believing
this
him
is yeah,
because he talks like freaking somebody that we would consider kind of trashy,
yeah,
lower class. And
yeah,
that's and so they say he's one of us.
yeah.
Really? Come on, man.
See,
Wake the f
th-
up. You know,
this is the thing
he's
that
one of
happened this
us.
week. This
He
is the thing that
talks
happened
like
this week.
me.
This is the thing that happened this week also. That someone's floating this idea that the Republicans and Trump are going to go after Social Security and Medicare and
I hope they
Medicaid.
do. And
Yeah,
I am on Medicare and Social Security. Okay,
yeah.
I'm on. I hope they do. Go ahead and do
Because
it
because
because that's the third rail.
oh yeah, oh yeah. They'll
I mean, we're
but
talking about
maybe
a huge population, right?
yeah,
That worked their butts off their whole life. We played by the rules, man.
yeah.
Right?
All right, but here's the thing. Here's what my counter to that was. God, someone said, I hate to see Trump do that because, like you said, he'd lose and it's a third rail. But my point, my counter was, look, Trump convinced people of color, many of whom would be subject to deportation. He convinced some of them to vote for him. And if you think if he could do that, then he could get people to vote against their self-interest on Medicare and Social Security. That's how I mean that's the master
See,
politician.
okay. In order for that parallel to be real,
Yeah,
he would have to actually start deporting people, whether he does it in mass or he does it in small groups, okay, so that they don't do sweeps like they tried to do in the 80s, right? Uh, uh, and even if he only does it legally, right, through the court system, and there are ways that he could do that, right? One of the things that the Democrats tried to do when they so-called yielded to was it Langford's plan, right, to deal with the quote broken immigration system, right?
yeah.
One of the elements of that was more judges. So
Oh
you set
yeah,
up
yeah,
more courts, more judges, you speed up the process, right? And
yeah.
what
Well,
that
that's
would
what they
do,
need.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean
And
they.
and so he could do that. Okay, he could do that. Now, if he starts doing that and it works faster and he's able to break up families and send heads of household and the parents back to wherever they came from, right? And they're saying, well, that might cost too much, so we're going to try and send them to places that will accept them if their home countries will not accept them. And that Venezuela has said, no, we're not going to take them back in. Okay,
Right.
so now they're saying, okay, how about Panama, the Bahamas,
Yeah,
and those countries are saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to accept them. So
yeah,
where are these people going to go, right? And and it's going to be really fun to watch this stuff happen. Okay, so
yeah,
now let's talk about the parallel. You're saying, okay,
yeah.
there's a
Well,
third
he
rail
got
if they try to
people.
go
Well,
after Medicare.
it's a real parallel because he got people to vote against their interest
Yes,
on
he
the
did.
one hand,
Yeah, but
and
okay, but if they try to cut the budget around Medicare and Social Security, that could be really immediate.
yeah,
Okay. The other one, the immigration one, is slow. Okay.
well,
That
people
stuff
don't
is
see it.
slow. And
Mm.
and and so the people, that's why I'm saying it's not an exact parallel. But if it started to happen and they saw families breaking up, particularly the people who are not criminals,
Mm.
okay, because what are they saying? Right? We're going after the criminals. All right.
Yeah,
Okay,
they're
fine.
not.
Let's
Yeah,
but anybody who came in initially undocumented is a criminal. Okay? Now they're saying, "Oh no, we're going to go after the violent criminals, the people who have done, real harm and all that kind of stuff." Okay, that process is going to take longer. Let's see if that's real. And
right.
if it's
Well,
real, then your thing is parallel. The parallel works
yeah.
because
Well,
people will say, "Hey, they're not coming after me." Right? That's what Filipinos said back in the 80s. They're not
yeah,
coming after me. We're legal. They turned on their own. They got, people with members of their own family who are overstays are saying they're not coming after me.
Yeah,
Okay, that's great.
they are.
Okay,
They are. They are.
what great people. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, this is the thing. So anyway, that was one of the things that came out this week. Another thing that came out this week, you got Elon Musk and you got Vivek Ramaswamy out
He's the real
there.
president. He's the real
Yeah,
president.
right.
Trump
He's
is
the
the
real.
shadow
Yeah,
president. You got it backwards. Everybody that's saying, that Musk is the Trump. I mean, is the shadow president. They got it backwards. He's the
oh
real
yeah, yeah.
president. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's put so much money into the Trump campaign to get Trump elected. He almost feels like he's the big patron, right? He's the
He
Colonel
bought his
Parker.
way in. He gets to, yeah, he gets to, he's like a part owner of Mar-a-Lago or something, I
Right.
mean.
He's Colonel Parker and Trump is Elvis Presley. Right.
Oh my God. There are going to be Elvis fans that are coming after you with a
Well,
noose.
here's the thing. I really feel like when, and normally with the analogy I see in the news is Donald Trump is the shadow to Joe Biden. But Joe
Oh,
Biden's already a shadow. He's already a shadow. But that was an implication in one of the stories in the Times recently. But I want to talk about Musk and Ramaswamy going out trying to, with this
Doge.
fake
Doge.
Doge, the Department of Governmental Efficiency,
Yeah.
for a fake agency
I
with
predict,
no
I
real
predict within the 6 months, in the first 6 months, they're going to have to change it to Doze.
Doge. Yeah.
D-O-Z.
Well, they can't
Yeah.
do anything. Number one, without Congress, anything they do to try to take money away is illegal. They can't do that.
They're
But
not a duly functional government
there,
entity.
there are nothing. If you were appointed as czar or a consultant, or it's a fake thing.
They're
And
advisors. They're advisors. Yeah, and they have no governmental power.
yeah, all right. So here's what I think. I've been saying this all week, that what Elon Musk and Ramaswamy want to do, because Ramaswamy said this to Axios this week. He said, "Look, we're not going to fire people. That's not what it's about. It's about getting government out of the things they shouldn't be in."
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and that, but that,
What
that's
happened to what happened? I thought they were going to get rid of the deep state.
no, the
They
deep
gotta get
state.
rid of the
No,
deep state, man.
they want to put their deep state in their deep state. They want their own piece of the deep state. No, this is the thing. Then it just dawned on me that
That's that youth group again. Those are the young
yeah,
alienated males saying they are
yeah.
deep state, man. I
They,
said, yeah, man.
I
You're talking.
know, but
I'm the son of the deep state. My dad was a custodian for the state of California at the
but
Supreme Court.
this is that was deep. That was pretty deep.
That
But
is a
this
deep
is
state, man. He was deep.
what
he,
they're
he got
saying.
deep retirement,
What they're saying now is that Ramaswamy said on the record. He said, "We're not going to fire people. It's not about that. It's about getting government out of the things they should not have been in the first place." And that signaled to me that they are doing a scouting mission for all entrepreneurs, where to put entrepreneurs' cash into the government. So you take a public thing and make it a private thing. And it doesn't serve the people, but it serves to make someone a profit, namely those entrepreneurs and
That's
business
what they've
people.
been doing. That's
Yeah.
exactly what they've been doing. If
Yeah.
you're talking about most of Musk's profits,
Yeah,
okay?
exactly. I mean,
You
you,
know,
you look at where Musk is. I mean,
Yeah,
he's got government
government
contracts.
contracts. That's
Yeah,
where it
same.
is, and we have become dependent on this guy, man.
Yeah,
For our science programs, we have
yeah.
become dependent on this guy. What did you see the difference between the spacesuits that they've developed? Okay, and the
Nicer
ones
spacesuits.
that NASA was still using, you know,
Uh,
and
Dipper, nicer.
that Boeing was still using, and that resulted in like two of our astronauts being stuck up there, right, for
Uh,
6 months instead of 6 weeks. What the hell? What? It's not going to be till February that they get to come back down. What the hell is that?
well,
That's
this is what happens when you get the private into the public. and you get the people in there, and because they're not thinking about things like safety, they're not thinking about things like getting the astronauts. They're thinking style, fashion, what it looks like, and also profit. Because I'm sure by going for fashion, they saved a pretty penny. They
I
they
don't
they
know.
saved
I don't
they
know.
saved,
I
but
don't know. Yeah, I mean, I
right,
was pretty
but
impressed with
that
the freaking suit.
that
I
that
was
example
impressed.
that example though, I mean, I like to use the example of government of public utilities like garbage collection.
Yeah, right on.
When you outsource it to waste waste
Waste
management,
management companies. Yep.
right? WMI,
Hey,
Fortune
what about
500.
PG&E? What about PG&E?
Oh
Con
yeah,
Ed,
yeah.
all of that. Those are necessities. We need that.
But
Okay.
you make it privatize, make it for profit, and that's when you're not serving the public, and that's when you're serving the interests of a handful of people, and that's what they're doing. They're trying to find out the places where they can privatize next. And education is one of those places. They're going to cut out the Department of
Well, they've been
Education.
wanting to do that for they've been wanting to
Yeah,
do that for 60 years. And the
yeah,
major
yeah,
and the major reason, the major motivation was integration. That's the major motivation. Underlying all of that stuff was race,
yeah. I mean, to
and
avoid, they
class.
wanted to avoid integration.
Exactly.
I mean, they were come to our integrated school. No, it's come to our segregated school.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
well, yeah. I mean, that was the main. Even as a kid, I saw
yeah.
that as the major motivation.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
that's
there were two motivations: the mixing of the races, that was
mm,
one. Okay, the class issues, that's number two. Okay, and the
mm,
other one was content. What's the content of public education? The
mm,
more it got concerned, right, with
mm,
telling the full story of American history, right, and describing the reality of the inequities in American society at the time, and we're talking about the post World War II era, right?
mm, mm.
The more that happened, the more they wanted, quote, reform of public education, and the more they were pushing vouchers. Vouchers is an
Vouchers. Yeah.
old approach, man.
Yeah. I'm really scared about the for the public schools because if they
Absolutely.
if they're going voucher, and I just think that God, I'm public schools were everything for me. I that was the opportunity. And what are they going to do to for people who aren't fortunate enough to afford private school? They'll give them the vouchers, and the vouchers aren't going to amount to much.
The
They're
most,
going to have to supplement.
all you got to do is look up the stats. The most Americans send their kids to public schools. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all you got to know. Okay. Now,
Oh, so then
what
the
brings
voucher thing isn't going to work.
it? Well, it might work for some families because they could afford or almost afford sending their kids to private institutions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So it'll help those people in the marginal socioeconomic position. Okay.
Mhm.
But it will not enable the poorest people. It will not enable the working class people. It will not enable the lower middle class, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
It,
to
hey,
to
I just think this is the thing about how many of those people do you think voted for Trump? I mean,
are you
I mean,
kidding me? 80%. 80 I'm
80%.
80% of them. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, people in those categories? Yes. You know why? Because they think that the egg shortage was Biden's fault. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? Okay. If you ask it, well, do you know what the effect of avian flu was in California alone?
Yeah.
In one week they killed over 1 million chickens because of avian flu. All right.
Yeah.
Do you think that has anything to do with driving the price of eggs up? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that Biden's fault? You know?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. People voted for all these cockamamie reasons. No pun
They weren't
intended.
cockamamie. The reasoning was faulty. The
Yeah.
reality was reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything costs too much. I can't afford it. This is unreasonable. It is unreasonable. But are they blaming the big corporations?
Yeah. And also, it's
Are they
not like
blaming
Trump's.
the Republican Party for
Yeah.
for not? It's crazy, man. I mean,
Well, it's not like Trump's going to make it any better either. I mean, it's if anything though, Trump will benefit from the economy that the Biden administration will leave
Well,
Trump,
the
and
only
then
reason they think he's going to make it better is because he says so.
yeah,
He has never done one damn thing that shows movement towards helping the poor and the working class, the middle
yeah,
class. Okay, he
and
never
yet, like
does
I
one damn thing, and then
see,
they say, "Oh, my life was better under the
and,
Trump administration
and
because I had to pay less taxes." Really?
yeah,
And what percentage of less taxes did you pay, and what did you lose in terms of governmental support?
yeah,
What
and,
did
and
you lose in terms of cost of
Dan,
living? Okay.
Dan, this is why I think when I say, um, you know, Trump, people talk people into voting against their interests, and then that's why when Trump floats this idea that Medicare, Medicaid, all that, Social Security, could be cut. I think he can convince people. He can
Then
convince people that to vote against their own
and
self
and,
interest
and
there
I
too.
I agree with you that he might be able to do that. I
Yeah,
think he could convince and if we're gonna, I'll agree with that. I will say okay, he could do that. He could convince him.
it'd
Okay,
be a lie. I mean,
I
he'd have
want
to
to
do it with
know.
lies.
I want to know what they're going to do about it. That's it. That's what
Yeah.
go. He can
Oh,
go ahead
well,
and convince them that that's the right thing to do.
well,
Okay, and I want to know what I got confronted by people at events all the time, especially family events. Weddings, funerals, and all that kind of stuff. And what do? They say Social Security and Medicare has got to get cut because it's the most expense paid for. And I said, well, actually, it's the military, okay, but the military's got a lot of hidden budget because it's under national security, and
right.
so there's no disclosure, okay.
Yeah.
There's no disclosure.
But get this. Here's why I think he also has a shot at doing this thing and bucking the third rail argument, and that is because who would have to run a some kind of safety net kind of thing but big insurers, big healthcare companies, and those people are the big moneyed folks that Trump deals with,
Yep.
and they would profit. This is more. It's really just an a shift, or the use of the public private thing that we were talking about, and shifting Social Security and Medicaid or Medicare to 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 private interest, and that's their goal. That's their goal. And
Yes,
if
it
you
is.
don't think it's happened, look at what Bush did when he took
Yes.
away
Yes.
pension plans,
That's right.
corporate pension plans, and they said, "Oh, we're going to have the 401k plan." This is, and now everyone loves the 401k plan because they're forced to. But because if you look, most people aren't even in the market
They don't
for
have
enough
it.
of the 401k.
Over the last 20 years, there have been survey after survey after survey asking, what's your savings looking like?
Yeah.
Okay. And what do they show? 50% of the middle class has no savings.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just saying, you look at, we're already on the downhill slope when Bush got rid of, corporates, you know, contributing to pensions, and then watering it down to the 401k. Now, some people are happy with their 401k. A lot of people are just don't have as much as they would have if corporations were, obligated to provide for their workers. But that's out the window, and that was Bush. Here's Trump coming along. That's why I think when I saw a headline and it was put out by a Fox News type, it said, Medi-Cal or Medicare, Social Security on the table.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
kind of scary, but you can't put it past them because it can happen. It can happen, and that's where you have to be more vigilant, fighting for the safety net for society, for poor people, for middle class people.
What are they going to do about it? Everything since Kennedy, okay, and his famous speech, right?
Mhm.
Do for your country, right? Don't
Ask
ask
not
what the
what your
president
country
can
can
do.
do for you.
Exactly.
Ask
Got
what
to do
you
for your
can do for
country.
your country. Yeah.
And ever since then, there's been a decline in that sense of common responsibility. and common purpose. There has been a decline. So it was our generation that jumped into Peace Corps, Vista, AmeriCorps, right, and all that. Some of the best nonprofit programs, for example, legal assistance programs, came out of that era, and a lot of young attorneys worked in those nonprofits. Two sets of people. One, very privileged people. The managing attorneys at the office where I clerked, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We're talking about women's finishing schools on the East Coast, right? We're talking about people who went to Harvard and Stanford for law degrees. Okay. Those were the supervising attorneys in the office where I worked. On the other hand, there were a couple of one immigrant attorney, right, who had to redo his whole Juris Doctorate, and he went on actually for a higher degree in law in order to qualify for California, passed the bar and all that, became a really well known, well established, and great performing a private attorney after he left the legal aid office. But his original activity was as a legal aid attorney. Okay.
So, so what
The
you're
next
saying?
guy, the next guy was a former striker at San Francisco State who went into law school a couple of years before me. He is still working as a semi-retired judge today. So
Hmm.
these people are making major contributions to
So
American
what?
society after they left nonprofit, government sanctioned organizations. Okay.
So what are you saying? You're saying that we're going to see a rise in that sentiment, that kind of sentiment, because of this, or we're going to have to if we're going to combat it, or
I'm saying that those days are over.
oh,
That they have
it's
been
going to be hard
they
to combat it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's so difficult to run a nonprofit these days. Okay.
Oh
And
yeah.
and those organizations have been reduced. There used to be 5 satellite offices for the San Francisco Neighborhood Legal Assistance
Yeah.
Foundation. 5 satellite offices. So there was one in the South of Market, that's where I worked. There was one in the Fillmore, there was one in North Beach, there was
Oh,
one in the Mission, and there was one in Potrero Hill. Okay,
wow.
and that also served the Bayview.
All
Okay,
the bases covered.
and yeah, and then it was reduced to like one office.
See
Okay,
that because Department of Government Efficiency, the
you
Dodge.
don't want overlap, and
So
this
look, so that doesn't bode well for us if all this is coming at a time when the overall sentiment to resist and fight that is gone.
not
That's
only
not.
is I'm the point that I agree with your point. Okay, but it's not only that the sentiment is gone; it's that the cuts have already been made.
Yeah.
Okay, the cuts that Nixon refused to make. Okay, okay, still resulted in overall reduction in available federal funds. And so a lot of organizations that had just gotten started in the
Yeah.
late 60s and early 70s merged. Okay. So, for example, there were 3 or 4 different Filipino American nonprofits operating in the South of Market, and they were merged into one.
Yeah.
It still exists today, West Bay. There again are other nonprofits working in the South of Market
It's
today.
tough though.
Okay.
Tough. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Tough though. And
And
they're
they're all
trying to
competing for the same funds from the same grantors.
right, and they're all trying to limit uh, the nonprofit, not just what was that bill to sort of limit the benefits to being a nonprofit that was maybe
You mean
changed to
the tax? Yeah.
tax exemption or something.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some bill that didn't get out of committee, but
It
a
wasn't.
lot
It
of
was
people,
tax exemption. It was the tax
yeah, a lot
exemption.
of
That's
tax,
the one I remember anyway.
yeah, a lot of nonprofits were freaked out about that. It didn't. I
Oh,
don't
no
think it got
kidding.
out. I don't think it got out of committee, but
That's how you get
well,
your donations. If you have
yeah,
a 501c3 status,
yeah,
that's who I donate to.
Yeah.
We're accumulating our donations right now. We're trying to we're setting up for applying for our tax payments in 2025 for this year for 2024,
Yeah.
and Linda is accumulating all of our donations to 501c3s.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, it's this is sobering because we should be preparing. We're like the people in Florida preparing for a hurricane. We're like boarding up the windows and like nailing things and
Yeah, this is a
sandbagging. And you know that we're as much as we do, I we may not be prepared for the big one. And
it's a
Donald
socioeconomic
Trump
hurricane. Yeah,
Donald
yeah.
Trump wants to be the big one. He wants to be the
Well,
big one.
we got a big one. We got a 7.0. Actually, there were two quakes, right? A 7
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
6 in close association up the coast. And
yeah.
there was a problem with the concern of the potential
Tsunami.
tsunami. And
Yeah,
then we found out from an expert that the slippage was horizontal rather than vertical, so that the likelihood of a tsunami was pretty low. And
yeah.
so what it showed us was, even though we're prepared with, like, okay, where do you turn off your gas and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
uh, people were saying, yeah, I didn't have a go bag ready. Okay,
yeah,
and the other one was, if it was a tsunami, how high do you got to get? And they're saying 100 feet above sea level. Okay, well, one of the reasons that all three of our houses are within a mile of each other. All the three of the properties that we've owned in the city, that were not for rental, right, but our own residential prop. Okay, they were all in the same related area, and one of the reasons was that the elevation is above 200 feet. Okay,
mm.
and in fact, where I'm sitting right now, it's around 300 feet above sea level. Okay. So I'm not worried about a tsunami, but I am worried for my fellow San Franciscans,
Oh yeah.
because, most of the Sunset District, all the way up to Sunset Boulevard, is susceptible.
Oh yeah, yeah. The sunset. Yeah, the sunset. All that sand dune.
Yep.
Most of that sand dune. Yeah, I
Eh,
was right there.
Part of the
I was in the
part of the
mission.
Richmond District too. Part of the Richmond
Yeah,
District too. It's just that there's less of it. Okay,
yeah,
it's a smaller area. The Sunset is a huge area, right?
yeah, yeah. The sunset would be gone, and you'd have some problems like maybe the hate. Up to the hate.
You'd have
Maybe that
problems
would be.
internally if it moved up the bay. I mean, I was tending my crewing for a boat that was berthed at Pier 39 when some tsunami hit, and you could see it, the water move and all the rest of that stuff, but all it did was make the water move up, and then back down again. And I was
Yeah,
thinking, I wonder how that affected, like, Antioch,
yeah.
and places that are low lying like that. What was the effect in Emeryville? And so that was the one that hit Santa Cruz really hard. Remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It wiped
Well,
out their marina, man.
all right. Well, listen. All right. Well, let's move on from that to. I'm going to talk to a couple more things that happened this week. Number one, you had martial law declared in South Korea.
For 6 hours.
Yeah. And people got freaked out for a little bit. They didn't know. They didn't know that you don't have a problem when a weak man puts on a strong man act. It doesn't
Yeah.
work. You got voted down. But now there's been things that people are talking about martial law now. And there was something in the Times today. Can martial law happen in America?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I mean, didn't it sort of? I mean, it was considered by Trump at one point during his first administration.
Yeah, but he kept spelling it wrong.
Yeah, he gives Marshall J.
He was confusing the Marshall Plan with martial law.
Yeah. So I mean, so it could happen. It's in the Constitution. The same aspect. I mean, it's military, right? Military necessity, right? That's when you do it.
Suspension of all constitutional rights. That's what it is. That's martial law, right? It's essentially a police state. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, and people say, "Oh no, that could never happen." Yes, it could.
Well, if you have the right people in the right places, right?
Well, you know,
Meaning that
even
someone's going to
it
back them up.
it
Someone
actually
might
is.
stand.
It's actually circumstance. It's not just the right people in the right place. It's circumstance. If
Well,
enough stuff that clearly looked like an imminent threat, okay,
yeah.
occurred, you could declare martial law. It could also be limited. It could, governors could try it, on a regional or
Oh yeah.
statewide basis. So there's executive power involved.
We'll have only martial law. Well, in the Philippines, they had martial law only in Mindanao for a long period of time recently, within the last
Yeah,
5
that's
years or
true.
so.
Yeah,
And then so someone can say, well, we'll have martial law in just Florida
California,
around
just California.
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, yeah. Now we'll just
Right.
do it in California. Yeah,
Yeah. And then, but you can roam free in North Dakota, South Dakota,
yeah. You can do
unless,
whatever the hell you want. Yeah,
unless the governor there, wants to shoot your dog.
yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So martial law and the couple other things. Supreme Court, how are
Oh
they going to
boy.
rule on the trans issue? Because the trans people were out there, and I'm glad because people need to hear about that case. I mean, we only hear about girls complaining about girls who are trans girls compete. They don't want to compete in sports with these trans people. They call them,
Men.
males, but
They say
yeah,
they're
they call
men.
them men.
Yeah.
But they're really trans women, trans girls.
Right.
But they confuse the issue, and that's the only way that people can really wrap their head around this. That, oh, my daughter's soccer team will be affected. My daughter's volleyball team, the swim team. That's
Yeah.
that's how
Well,
people
see,
understand this issue.
once again, some of the people who were the plaintiffs, okay, people who were speaking for the plaintiffs, not lawyers, but
Yeah,
people who are members of the plaintiff group, right?
yeah,
They have said, I don't want to have to share the locker room with a man. That's what they're saying, okay?
right.
And so they're taking on the same kind of attitude of the people who were showing the transgender ads in the multiple times during football
Yeah,
games,
right,
particularly college Saturday football games, right?
right.
You know, and so that's what they're doing. They're adopting that position, which is grossly unfair, right?
Well,
To
yeah, it misrepresents the
It is an
idea that,
absolute
yeah,
misrepresentation.
yeah, because Tennessee is about the denial of health care to humans. I mean, they happen to be trans, but you can't. How can you deny health care to people who need it? I mean, if you replace, well, if they denied health care to Filipinos or Asians or Latinos or
Are you are
blacks,
you are you forgetting Proposition 187?
well, I know about Proposition One. That was about immigrants denying health care to immigrants
Well, but it's still
and
a group.
undocumented, not Americans. But these trans people are Americans.
Okay, but there's still a group, an identifiable group,
Yeah,
right? And they're more easily identifiable.
yeah.
Okay, in many instances, if people, if they out themselves, okay, or if people are suspect, they're suspicious of a person's actual gender, and so the laws are voiced in terms of your birth gender. What was your gender at birth? That's what they're doing.
And that's discriminatory.
And the Supreme Court is going to say that's okay, but what standard are they going to use? Okay, so if they decide in favor of the plaintiffs, what standard are they going to use? Is it simply transgender? Period, right? Or are they going to say, how far along are these people who have been transgendered? Are there still remnants of their original to what extent there's remnants of their original gender, right? How are they going to do that? How are they going to make that measurement? And I can tell you, when they said that employers can use accents to determine whether someone is employable, number one, or number two, whether or not their language facility, okay, is a hindrance to promotion, okay. Uh, and a higher level of responsibility on a given job. They never came down with an accent measure. There's no measure. So it's really up to the employers to determine. And if they say we think that this accent is so strong that it interferes with quality rendering of quality services to the general public, and that's what they used in the Fragante case. That's it.
Brigante. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's so it's subjective, and then you got to
Yeah,
sue again. You got to sue again.
there it is.
Got to keep
So we're
suing.
going to be seeing all this kind of stuff going on, and like it's Tennessee, so they could throw it back to the states and say it's a state basis. They did
Well,
the same thing with abortion, and
yeah,
that's what
and
that yeah.
this is where Ketanji Brown Jackson made a good point. She said, when Justice Roberts said, "Well, I don't know if we got to weigh in. Maybe it's up to the states," implying that the Supreme Court didn't have enough medical knowledge, and that
Oh
and
boy,
that
here we go.
the medical expertise. This is a fast changing area, and Ketanji Brown Jackson said, "Well, God, that never stopped us from making a decision.
On
You
abortion,
know, previously, we didn't have
yeah.
to be doctors.
Or how about contraception? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Or
Griswold, 1966.
I'm just saying, that this is uh, a critical case, and I'm glad there was some coverage on it on Monday, but here we are on
Oh,
Friday.
you're not
But,
taking up that criticism that there's
but
hypocrisy committed by the Supreme Court.
hypocrisy. Oh, no, no, no,
You're
no
not. Are you doing
hypocrisy.
that? Are you?
Oh, hypocrisy. Hypocrisy just means that you've forgotten and you've gone to a change. That's not. Doesn't mean that
No, I think it's that you've grown philosophically.
yeah, yeah.
You've evolved
Evolved. Yes,
philosophically.
we've evolved.
So now you're backwards thinking on how to eliminate something that's been a right for almost 70 years, right? Okay,
The
which
right
is
to,
the right to use prophylactic devices to prevent impregnation,
yeah,
right? That you're gonna remove that right. That's not at all backward thinking. That's
yeah.
a growth. That's philosophical, ethical,
Or
and
maybe
moral growth.
abstinence. Abstinence. That's what the Catholics would say.
Uh,
Abs
yeah. Well, they said rhythm.
Rhythm, rhythm.
They said rhythm.
Up
Okay,
and down, up
and
and down.
then and
Up and
then
down, not in and
yeah,
out. Up
but
and down.
women are saying, well, you take this pill and it does exactly that. It settles down. The science is that it makes you more predictably rhythmic
Yeah.
in your menstrual cycle, and so this is a better way. They say, no, 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 that's
See, look,
interference. It's
this is
interference with a semi divine act to engage in sex. The purpose is to procreate. That's the
yeah.
purpose of engaging in sex. Okay. Um, and so anything that's recreational is actually and not consistent with the responsibility of procreating, right?
Mm,
Is not only a sin against God, okay, it's an abuse of the act in an inhumane way.
mm.
Okay. So
I just
you shouldn't be feeling good.
I just thought it was exercise. I'm exercising my right. All right, so Dan, we one last bit.
It is exercise. That's for real.
Yeah. Pearl Harbor Day. Let's
Oh no, the forgotten,
Per,
the
December
forgotten.
7th. People aren't going to talk. I mean, I have a feeling that people aren't going to get into Pearl Harbor that much. I mean, they might remember it, but it's a day that lives in infamy. But you saw how the World War II commemorations have been. I
Yeah.
mean, for the most part, I mean, they like to do the round numbers. They don't do every year, but I think it's good to remember Pearl Harbor, not necessarily from the standpoint of, about how it drew America into the war so much, but from the standpoint of what it meant to the Asian American communities here in
Oh man.
the United States. I mean, people don't that's a part of the history, the Pearl Harbor history that people don't talk about much, Really?
Yeah, actually, you're right. We do in ethnic studies, and
Yeah, in ethnic studies,
particularly in Asian American studies, we do.
but
Um,
people don't know what happened on December 7th when you were in California, for example, and how that upset the the rank of Asian ethnic minorities in California, and how it plummeted the Japanese, but the Filipinos and the
it,
Chinese
it
went
it plummeted
sky.
everybody. We were all suspect. We were all
Yeah,
suspect because people couldn't tell the difference.
yeah,
They couldn't tell the difference between ethnic groups. You know, so when I was a kid, we were all chinks.
yeah,
I called it getting chinked. Okay, that people would say, ching chong Chinaman. They do that thing, the rhyme, the ditty, ching chong Chinaman sitting on the fence, trying to
yeah,
make a nickel out of 15 cents.
yeah,
It's the other way
yeah,
around,
yeah,
trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. That kind of stuff, right? Um, it. I remember wanting to get in a pickup baseball game, and you grab the bat and top
yeah.
the
You
the
put
the top of the
you
bat.
do one of
That's
those?
right. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And then you got picked. Um, and sometimes I'd get picked, and one kid would say, "What side of the war did your father fight on?" I said, I
Yeah,
said, which war? I said, he's a American veteran. He wore a U.S. military,
yeah,
uniform, and he fought in the Philippines and in Asia, New Guinea, and etc. And and then they kind of looked at me with doubt. And so what I did was I got a couple of my dad's ribbons,
yeah,
and I brought them. And I said, yeah, this comes off of my dad's uniform. This is one of his ribbons, and it's for an accomplishment during the war, right? And they still would doubt.
yeah,
It was pretty bad.
yeah,
They wanted all of us to be outies, and they didn't want us. You know, the Little League baseball was still segregated. Luckily, the Japanese Americans had their own freaking league, and so they um, and that's one of the reasons that they were so good. I mean, they were so good at so many sports that they could compete against the white teams, uh,
yeah,
and they hated that. The white teams hated that. The saving grace was public schools, because a lot of the Asians really did well, just like African Americans. They did really well in public school sports, and they couldn't be denied. I mean, they were starting to make statewide status, right, at meets and stuff. And then there was the Jesse Owens effect and all the rest of that. So,
yeah,
yeah. But then look when Major League Baseball finally got integrated, right?
yeah. All right, but Dan, on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, the next day they bombed the Philippines.
Well, actually, it was only the next day because it's a different time zone. But yeah, it was 12 hours later, so yes. And that was all part of the plan, right? Because the Philippines was being set up by MacArthur as a forward military installation, just in case the Japanese got aggressive. And so the problem was that he had no time and not enough money to be able to set up a reasonable defense. I mean, so they bombed what was there, and made it impossible to, or nearly impossible to, defend the Philippines properly.
And so, what was the impact of all that? I mean, you said that people were
And
still anti-Asian.
antagonism by Chinese and Filipinos against Japanese Americans in the U.S., particularly in California.
Yeah.
Some Filipinos actually went out and started to hunt down Japanese Americans and do them harm.
Really?
Uh, I got that. This is something that I was very hesitant to research further, and now that most of that generation of Filipinos is gone, or all of them are gone virtually, right? I have no one to confirm that. But yeah, they did. And there are other members of our generation, second generation like myself,
Yeah.
who will tell you
Yeah.
that we heard stories from, they would brag about it. Some Filipinos would brag about it,
That they
that
go after
they
the
would go out
Japanese.
and hunt, yeah, Japanese Americans, and try to kill them.
And
You
then
know,
what about the Chinese would have buttons. Everyone who was non-Japanese would have a button, would wear a button saying,
saying
I'm not,
I'm not a
I'm
Jap.
not Jap. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Time, was it Time or Life? It was one of those magazines that had an interior page, and on one full page had a picture of a Chinese person, male, and on the facing page, opposite page, they had a picture of a Japanese male. Okay, and then they would point out differences. They had arrows pointing to the eyebrows, to the eyes, to the shape of
Really?
the nose. Yes, yeah, it's classic. It's got to be on YouTube or somewhere. But look it up. I used it in class. I haven't used it in a long time, but I'll start
Yeah.
using it again in your
Well,
honor.
this is the thing. I bring it up because when they say we're not going back, and when Kamala Harris used that as her one of her you know tropes or one of her mottos, we're
Yes,
not going back. Well, she didn't win, and it looks like we are going back. We are going back to
absolutely.
that
We're
day.
going backwards, and people are accepting it. Okay.
Yeah.
See, I'm glad you brought this up, because here's what it comes down to. People said, did you think, what was the reaction to the Harrison Waltz argument, right? That it was a, what I would call a cushioned argument about race and racism, represented in Trump past behavior and policies, right? And they would say that he is leaning on the historic tendencies of American society regarding race and immigration as well. And when they're questioned about it, people who uh, had voted for Trump say, this is not a racist society. This is the greatest country in the world. And then people are saying, "Wow, man, that's so weird." I mean, it's so much against their own interest, as you raised earlier. How could they possibly say that? And here's my answer: most of these people were immigrants or had immigrants in the generation immediately above them. One generation up. Okay, do you think people with that kind of background and experience came to the United States, did all of the struggles that they did, and left family behind, right? And they're going to come here and readily accept that America is racist, that it has a racist history, that a major element of its culture is steeped in racism and ethnic prejudices. And you can point out all of that history. I can point it out easily, right?
Yeah.
It's in the freaking Constitution, right?
But they don't. But they accept it because they don't want to admit that they made a mistake, or that
No, they just don't want to accept that America's racist.
yeah.
They don't want, who wants to come to a racist society and say that I want to be part of this society?
Well,
How,
but they
how can
can.
it be, how can it be the greatest country in the world if it's racist?
Well, it can be a great country if everyone is united to fight racism. It can be a great country if, I mean,
Is that what
I
they
just,
mean when they say MAGA?
well,
American, make
I,
America great again? Is that what they're talking about? When
well,
was
I'm
it
just
great?
saying, I'm just saying, if you're,
Under what conditions are people seeing greatness?
yeah, well, they see the American fantasy. Oh, we're number one, and it's not. It's just based on that feeling of we're the greatest country. Just that
Yeah,
phrase
well,
and that
that's why
blind
people come here.
acceptance.
They come here because it is the greatest country, and it is the wealthiest country. But who
Yeah,
has access to that wealth?
right.
Okay, you
Well,
can't say this is a great country and we're the richest country and all that, and then say, okay, but I can't, enjoy myself. We have no leisure because we're worried about paying rent versus eating. Be
they're aspirational, these people.
Yeah.
they're aspirational, but I'm saying you're saying that they can't accept the racism because they don't want to accept it because they came here and they want to fit in. And so it's just kind of we're assimilating, we're become this is what but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean
What are we doing here? Yeah, and if you, even if you don't, if you agree that it's not, I'm not saying that everybody that lives in American society is racist. I'm saying that, look at what the Republicans say when it was raised, in the 2020 election period, when people would say, the interviewers would ask members of Congress, "What do you think about this criticism of the existence of institutional racism?" And
yeah.
they just came around and said there is no such thing as institutional racism. You know, I
So
mean,
they're in denial. They're in denial.
yes, and it's easy for them to deny it
Yeah.
until you point out the Constitution, and then when you say, "What does this mean? What is why is there mention of Indians not taxed?" Okay, that's a racial definition. That's a racial group of people. Okay, and what does the three quarters, or the three fifths rather, compromise? What is that about? What does that mean? Okay, and why is it that nobody can talk about race or slavery, right, on the floor of Congress until 1809? That's a provision in the U.S. Constitution. So what does it do? Guarantees the institution will continue to exist all the way up to and including 1809. And we know what resulted from that, right? Okay. The Dred Scott decision and
Oh,
the
Dred Scott.
propulsion of American society into the Civil War. And
Right.
then
Dred Scott would
how
yeah,
do they
it's
rationalize the Civil War in the South? It's over culture and tradition. Okay, it's
right.
not
And
about
the
the institution of slavery. It's about economics. Yeah, well,
and
but the reason for the economic difference and the power of the South was slavery.
right.
So
And the Dred Scott decision again, it was a Dred Scott who was a freed man was
yes,
fighting for his freedom, but he was turned down and said he was owned. He was a slave.
and he could be repatriated essentially to a
Yeah.
slave state.
And it was actually in Missouri. He
Yes,
moved from a slave state to a free state, said he was free. They said, no, you're a slave.
yeah.
He lost his case.
Well, and they were fighting, and one of the reasons for the politics of that was that they were looking at the westward expansion, and they wanted California to be a slave state.
Yeah.
You know,
And
after the
and what
discovery of gold.
yeah. And one of the things I believe we mentioned this before, Judge Taney made the decision. And it was about and there was a case that Taney decided that had to do with whether or not Filipinos are in this story, whether or not a Filipino was black or
Yeah, that's
white
right.
or black. And it was determined that what it had to do with whether or not he had the right to defend himself.
I can't remember.
Said, yeah, I forget that too. It was Taney's case over a is it Roldan? No, not Roldan.
No, and roll
Roldan's
down was a different. That was
is
marriage.
that was the marriage. Oh well, I forget also, but I know that this is the Filipino in Dow. His name was Dow, Dow.
That was it. The Dow case. Yeah,
The
yeah,
Dow case, the Dow case, and
yeah.
Dow was a Filipino sailor, and he was
The
what he was.
DOW,
He
Filipino-born
killed. He
sailor of an
killed the
American
captain.
ship who had been accused of murder.
Yeah,
Okay, and tried in Maryland. Taney used for the first time the notion that whites, and I'm quoting you, were a master race. Quote, the race of which the masters were composed. Unquote. There it is. I mean, it's kind of easy, right? And
yeah.
you were quoting Taney. And
Taney.
you
Yeah,
said it's proof of superiority since only those of European backgrounds could be part of a political society, okay, in the colonies. Therefore, the only question Taney saw that was significant was whether Dow was a person who had any rights at all, okay, meaning a white Christian person. So if you were not a white Christian person, you could be denied all rights. All right, by Taney's measure.
And that was an earlier decision that came prior to his big decision, which triggered the Civil War, which is the Dred Scott
Judge
decision.
Scott, yeah, exactly.
But he used it pretty much to say, hey, you don't have rights unless you're white and a Christian.
And there were all kinds of following cases in California. There were all kinds of following cases. The enforcement of the Mann Act against Chinese crossing state boundaries,
Oh, yeah, the Mann
into
Act.
Nevada. And if they were in the company of a woman, not their wives, they were presumed. This is a presumption of law. This is a
Yeah.
major constitutional violation, right? To have that one of the first things you learn is presumptions of law are unconstitutional, right? But in California, they said if a Chinaman is crossing the border with a woman who is not his wife, okay, he is doing so as an act of promoting prostitution. Okay,
Ooh,
so
I didn't.
that's it. It was a presumption of guilt. Okay,
Yeah.
so the guy's a felon instantly if he crossed the border with his sister or his mom or his grandma
When
or his
was this? This
auntie.
was 18.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what year.
18.
I can't
Well,
remember.
it's just that,
I discovered the
yeah.
case completely by accident as I was researching something else, and I found
Well,
it.
this is the thing about these laws. You see how much racism is in the law in the
It's
past.
so easy to point this stuff out. I have a list,
Yeah.
of both laws that were legislated and then decisions that were made, right? And it all comes down, and it all is about Asians of one group or another, right?
Mhm.
And it shows the parallels, and it also
Yeah.
shows Asians being treated the same as blacks.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah. Yeah. Well,
so
well, this.
Gong Lum versus Rice in the 1920s, right?
Yeah.
In the South, the Gong Lum case. And
Yeah.
and, and they said, well, we live in the city limits and we're not black.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, you're not white either. So you got to go to the black school.
But let me tell you, let's go back to the Pearl Harbor thing because once there was antagonism toward all, but I'm citing Don Mabalin's book, Little Manila's in the Heart, because she talked about how in Stockton and parts of California that there was a way that Filipinos and Chinese went up in stature as the Japanese fell, and that they took advantage of that. I mean, all Asians were considered, below sea level, but when Pearl Harbor happened, the Japanese fell, and the Chinese and the Filipinos took advantage of that, and they were more favored.
Well, and that's true. And part of it was because they wanted people to volunteer to fight the war. And
Ah,
the irony is that initially, when my father and others tried to volunteer right after Pearl Harbor, okay, they were denied because of their immigration status, that they were not permanent residents or citizens. And so they were seen as nationals, quote unquote,
right.
and therefore not subject to enlistment. And so the president of the United States had to come down with an executive act to allow them to
Allow that.
enlist. You know,
Right, right, and that created in the segregated army the Filipino, the first and second, right,
yeah, first and second
and they
regiments
went in to fight, but yeah, it's funny, and
with
then
with a white command
all right,
structure.
so are there still some residual feelings about? I mean, I suppose if you know that, or if it happened specifically to your family, there might be, but in general, do you sense that kind of tension between Japanese and Filipinos and Chinese? Because that would be a flashpoint,
I think
Pearl Harbor.
among first generation immigrants, yes.
Yeah.
Even though they're the son the sons and daughters, or even the grandsons and granddaughters of the people who actually went through the experience, right? that prejudice continues because it's fostered by the grandparents and parent generations.
So people today, like in their 30s and 40s, maybe.
Yeah, if they're first generation immigrants, yeah, it's
Yeah.
fostered in because it's fostered in the old country too. And one
Yeah.
of the reasons is the denial by the Japanese government and by representatives of Japanese people that they committed any of the inhumane acts that were committed against people who they saw as their racial inferiors. The acts of maiming and torture and all the way to the comfort women issue of
Yeah.
women sold, dragged into, kidnapped, and dragged into sexual slavery, and they
Yeah.
deny that. They say, that these people were volunteering because it was a way to avoid, other worse circumstances. And to a certain extent, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, but in no way were they volunteers.
See, my mom, that was one of the things she tried to avoid when she was living in Manila during the Japanese occupation. But let's jump forward to 2024 these days. It's would you say it's a strong sentiment that's there, or just one of those things that you acknowledge happens, but it's like, oh, that's my grandfather talking, or that's my father
I think
talking.
among younger generations, it's the ugliness of war. But when the Japanese government refuses to recognize it, that's a restatement of racial inferiorization of other
Yeah.
people. So yes, I would have to say yes. Okay,
That
and that was most evident when the statue, right, downtown,
the
uh,
comfort women.
on yeah, the Comfort Woman memorial, right,
Yeah.
was dedicated. Um, and friends of mine, people that I knew from college, right, and that I've known since then, were advocates for the Japanese government position.
Hmm. Well, that
Yeah,
was. I mean, did it surprise you or stun you a little bit?
it did, and it still surprised and stunned other Japanese Americans. There are other friends of mine, from the same historical experience, the San Francisco State College strike and setting up government agencies, nonprofits, and all that, and making arguments in front of government agencies and grantor foundations. We all worked together, including the people who more recently took the Japanese government position in denial of all of the atrocities committed against people during the Second World War, uh,
Yeah.
and also denial of the Comfort Woman history.
Well, so I mean, so these things come deep, or they,
Absolutely.
and it's sort of hard to try to extricate and eliminate them. And these historical memories serve as
It can be done. The Germans
yeah,
did it. The Germans accepted, the Austrians and the Germans accepted the responsibility of the Holocaust, and they
yeah,
commemorate it, and they say that this was deeply inhumane. Okay, and it beyond morals and ethics, it was just profoundly inhumane, and they accept it. Japanese have not done that.
yeah. And Japanese Americans, though, for the most part, some have ties to the old country. Maybe
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the most
Well,
part,
yeah.
they're more
For the
open.
most part, they're not defending it. No,
Yeah,
for the most part, they I mean, my dad. I remember one when if we were anywhere near J Town, he would
yeah,
get his favorite fish at, quote, the American Fish Market, which was right
yeah,
on Buchanan near
yeah,
Sutter.
yeah,
And I thought, well, we're going to the American Fish Market because he goes, you don't understand. Japanese people and Japanese Americans, um, they eat raw fish. And I thought, ew. Eat raw fish, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, why would they do that? He goes, well, it's just that's one of the ways that they've learned in their culture to be able to prepare fish. And so because they eat raw fish, it has to be absolutely fresh. And so if you want absolutely fresh fish, you come to the Japanese fish market, right? And so I understood that. Then he would take his car, even though it was still under warranty, he would take it to Mister Yamato for tune-ups and stuff. And I'd say, well, you had to fight during the Second World War. Did you have to kill Japanese men? And he said, yes, that was war. And he goes, and I said, but you take your car to, Japanese mechanic. And he goes, this is two different people. This is Japanese people who happen to live in the United States. And the people that we were killing were Japanese people from Japan. Right. So, and I remember that conversation, probably somewhere around 1955, because I remember the car in which, that conversation took place.
Yeah.
So my father was quite uh, philosophical about it, and political as well. But on the other hand, my mother was refusing to buy anything that was made in Japan. Okay, all the way into the 70s, and
Yeah.
I know I was making fun of her when I said, "So you think that because you're buying a Magnavox or a Philco product, right, that has a traditional American corporate brand on it, that you're getting something that's American, right?" And so, I told her, these things, they're just using the American brand name. But the
Yeah.
likelihood is, if it's an electrical device or electronic device like a radio, that is Japanese, that is made in Japan. And then
Yeah.
when they started selling cars here in the
I
60s,
yeah.
I said, well, have fun trying to not buy anything Japanese because,
My mom was the same way. My mom was the same way as your mom.
yep,
She wouldn't let me take her to a sushi bar. It just
right. Yeah,
the
well, my mother
Japanese.
resisted that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother
And
resisted that too. But at the
and
same
yeah,
time, she wanted us to have our wedding banquet at what is it, Miyako, at the Miyako
yeah,
Hotel.
Miyaka.
And I thought, well, that's a hell of a turnaround, right?
Yeah. Well, solidarity. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. So,
we didn't do it there, but not
yeah.
for the reason she wouldn't have wanted us to do it there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, Dan. So there we had a complicated conversation today, going from
yeah, it's a tough one. All of these things involving race, ethnicity, global history,
yeah,
they really lend a great deal of complexity to these issues. And as you suggest, most people don't discuss them at that level, particularly the internal
yeah.
conflicts,
Well,
among and between different ethnicities.
I just think that when it comes to Pearl Harbor, like when I read Dawn's detailed scholarship in her book about the day after and how it was in Stockton, that kind of surprised me. I wasn't really expecting that. I thought everyone thinks, oh, we have a solidarity. We're all Asian Americans, right?
No,
And it wasn't that.
nope.
It wasn't that.
Yeah. And also, there was the issue of farm owner versus employer versus
Right.
farm worker.
Right.
So there was a class difference between Japanese Americans who were owners of the farms and
Oh yeah.
Filipino who were farm workers. And her dad was a foreman. He was uh, he was the kind of guy that would organize
Yeah.
groups of men.
Oh, you're talking about. You're talking
Contract.
about.
He was labor. He did labor contracting.
Yeah. You're talking about Ernie Mabalon.
Ernie, and he was also a GO, Gran Oriente, and
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I believe he was a 33rd.
Yeah.
Uh,
He was.
really great guy. Very political. Very
Ernie.
political.
Ernie.
Very
I knew.
knowledgeable. Very much an activist.
I knew Ernie better than Don. He was a guerrilla.
Yeah, he was a gay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well,
well,
in some respects, you would have known more about his stuff during the war than Don, because there's a gender thing. The men didn't talk to the women about that. Their
oh
daughters,
yeah.
you know.
No, I knew him mostly from when I covered Stockton, and he was at all the different community events, and
Yeah.
that's how I got to know him. But yeah,
Well,
Ernie,
yeah.
yeah, good guy.
Dylan
Good.
Delville's dad also was active that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Dylan, I didn't know Dylan's dad, but I
Yeah.
certainly know Dylan. Well, anyway, all right. So Dan, I thank you for sharing. We'll wrap it up. Are the 49ers going to do anything this week? Are they going to be any good?
Well, they're predicted to win, and they're favored. I shouldn't say predicted. They're favored to win, but I'm
This is
skeptical about.
Chicago, right?
Yeah,
Chicago,
the
the
Bears.
Bears. I don't
Um,
know.
I
I don't
Yeah, I'm
care. I don't care
skeptical.
anymore. Yeah, I don't care anymore, but I care. But I don't care. But I care. I mean,
I care. I care. I'm disappointed, but they got hurt literally. They got
yeah,
hurt. They got too many injuries, and that magic just ain't there. And I kind of understand that. I mean, it's hard to get people to pull together. As opposed to the Warriors. The Warriors did really well yesterday,
yeah.
and
They're doing bad. They didn't have their stars, and they still did well.
well, I remember a certain friend of mine, who used to knock the hell out of Wiggins, and he performed quite well yesterday. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well, I liked I saw I liked I saw that game. I saw the Warrior game. The sports is sort of the the antidote sometimes, but
absolutely.
yeah,
That's what it's
but
for.
yeah, but it's not. I've discovered poetry now as a way to try to understand the world and to understand the chaos, that doesn't make sense in this. It's sort of like it's the crack of life, poetry and literature, and so
You mentioned that the last time we spoke,
yeah,
on this vlog, and
and since then you've
I
it's
have pulled several uh, books by poets that I know. And I'm talking about people from
like
people of color, right?
yeah.
And I've pulled several books, short books by them, and I'm rereading them because you've motivated me to do that.
Well, yeah, Don Lee, Ed Bullens. You talk about black poets, Ishmael Reed.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of the female
Yeah,
poets,
I
Nikki
pulled
Giovanni.
a couple of issues of Aeon that was uh, edited, curated, and edited by Janice Mirkatani.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Janice
yeah,
Mircatoni,
there's some good stuff in there.
the late,
Even when she was still writing as Janice Miller, that was her married
oh,
name.
the late Janice Mircatoni.
Yes, yes, yeah, very sorely missed.
Yeah,
Um,
oh yeah, man. I was once walking around. I don't know where I was. I was walking around in the Mission District, and she was driving, and they, she was with the Reverend, and they saw me. They said, "Hey, you need a ride?" I said,
that's good. That's cool.
and I said, "Yeah, yeah, just take me to the bar." And they gave me a ride. We talked, but really, you know, I always liked Janice, and when she passed, it was sad. But she was a
Yeah.
poet. She was a poet.
Yep, yep, she was.
She was a
She
poet.
was. She also, well, when I first met her, she was just the second in command at Glide, um, and she was also a dancer.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
And yeah, that was a hell of a package.
yeah.
Um, my
Well, poetry and dance. Right?
housemate developed a relationship with her that
Oh,
most
okay.
people don't know about.
All right. Well, and then we'll just sort of like okay.
Well, this was before
Yeah,
she got that involved with Cecil,
yeah.
but yeah. It was
Well, but this is another conversation for our mezcal meeting.
yeah. Well, this is the kind of thing that you don't put out in the public. But I there's a couple of people that are alive that knew about that
Yeah.
relationship.
Well,
But
okay. Well, all right. Well, Dan, see what comes out of reading poetry. This comes out
oh,
of reading.
rereading poetry, the easy stuff is Oscar's, right? Oscar Peñaranda stuff. He's working on another book, and I don't know if this one's going to be. I have to check to see if he got a grant because I wrote a recommendation for a big grant for another book. But anyway, we'll see
So
what
great.
happens.
All right. Well, listen, Dan, thank you very much for being here. Hopefully the Niners will win. We'll come back. We'll see what happens. Hopefully Pete Hegseth loses and America wins
Oh man,
next week. Let's
but
hope.
there's a whole bunch of people, and it looks like horse trading, right? If we burn Hegseth the same way that we burned Gates,
Gates.
then we got to let some of these other people through.
Yeah, you
And
can
like,
let.
are they going to let Gabbard through? My God.
No, no. I think you got to keep people who are useful idiots and sex offenders. You got to keep them gone. Just a standard,
Yeah, but
normal milk
Gabbard is a
toast.
useful idiot. I mean, she's been out there visiting
I
people.
know you got to get rid of the useful
You see
idiots. They're
that,
not
one
useful.
interview that she did of young girls and who suffered, their families suffered through bombings during the
No, what'd
Saddam,
she say? What'd she say?
Assad, rather, not Saddam, but
Aside.
Assad's attacks. Remember when there was suspicion that he was using
Oh yeah,
gas as well, and
yeah,
then she asked them, "How do you know that it was Assad's military that attacked you?" I mean, this was kids, man. I
yeah.
mean, just an awful person, just
She's yeah.
absolute opportunist. And I've seen these people all my life.
She makes Nikki Haley look like a saint.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
yeah, she
yeah,
does.
Nikki. Yeah, I would.
Haley bounced around, but she wasn't an absolute hypocrite. I
Yeah,
mean, in
not
Gabbard's
not
case,
absolute hypocrite.
yeah, yeah.
I know.
Well, yeah, but Gabbard was a liberal Democrat, and she
I
got
know.
elected to Congress from Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I never fell for Tulsi Gabbard, but anyway.
yeah.
All
Well,
right.
a
Well,
lot of
listen.
other people have. Boy,
I
I
know.
mean,
Well,
he
she.
the one thing that he's trying to do is he's trying to get more people who are telegenic, right,
Yeah.
as well. So that was part of his plan, right? Is put up some telegenic people. He really slipped badly with Gates, though. I mean, the guy looks like walking Botox, right?
Yeah.
So.
Gates and Hegseth too. I mean, they're just sex offenders. All right, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
All right, thank you.
Hopefully
Thanks
we
for
can.
having me on again.
And I'll talk to you on
Enjoy
the
your
other side.
weekend. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, we'll pick a time. All right, Dan. There goes
Regards.
my friend Daniel Phil Gonzalez, College of Ethnic Studies, Asian American Studies, San Francisco State University Professor Emeritus. You like someone like Dan because he has this vast knowledge of everything, and he'll let you know everything, and he can talk about the law, and he can speak with authority. He's a great resource, not just to the Filipino community, but the community at large. And really, and I've known him a long time. We were younger. We were younger, but now it's just sad. It's sad that we're that where we are in history, where we are in America. We we thought we'd be so far along, and now you get this sense of like going in reverse, right? That's where we're going. So anyway, hey, so we're going to close out. I want to remind people again of this thing I'm doing. I'm co-hosting with Tennessee Reed, the Penn Oakland 2024 award ceremony. It's not live, but the Rockridge Library is putting it out. We're all going to be virtual. So don't show up to the Rockridge Library, but show up to the Rockridge Library website at oaklandlibrary.bibliocommons.com. And you'll see me hosting the event along with Tennessee, and there'll be Oakland writers, Ishmael Reed, the most notable, or not the most notable, but he's been around. He's co-founder of Penn Oakland. Penn stands for, I didn't know this, it stands for Poets, Essayists, and Novelists. Oakland, Penn Oakland. And it's the Oakland chapter of the national group. Penn has its own chapter. Jack Foley will be there, Lucille Langday, Menchu, what's her, God, I should know her name. I don't have the paper in front of me. She was the former poet laureate of El Cerrito. She'll be there. Cheryl Fabio, other winners or winners of this year's awards. It should be a fun event. You want to find out what is capturing the or what the Penn Oakland members feel is award worthy and worth reading this year. Check it out. Penn Oakland 2024 award ceremony. Go to oaklandlibrary.bibliocommons.com and you got to register. Just register. Show up. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. Tomorrow. That's at 2:00 Pacific time. And so, thank you for joining me. We're here Monday through Friday. We'll repeat this through the weekend. Thanks again to Daniel Phil Gonzalez, the Professor Emeritus. We like to close. Check me out on Patreon. Patreon.com/Emil Amok. Also on Substack, substack.com/@Emil Amok. YouTube.com/@Emil Amok 1. And on Facebook and all the regular places and on X. Hey, thank you. We're going to close out with a little meditation. It's good to be meditative. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time.